That I yield to the gentleman from 5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
I thank the chairman. Much has been made about why we are in New York City. In a memorable moment shortly before he was elected, former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani told an editorial board meeting he cared about statistics, but the real measure would be whether people actually feel safer. That, he said, was the ultimate test of policing and political leadership. He said that in 1993 when New York was averaging 2,000 murders a year. By 2013, it was down to 333 due to the strong support of law enforcement and the anti-crime policies adopted by the city. Got down to 288 by 2018, but now it is back up to the mid-400s. I think this is the question, is whether or not you feel safe. And the question I'd ask of Ms. Brame, Ms. Harrison, others, do you feel safe in New York City right now?
No.
Yeah. Mr. Alba, do you feel safe in New York City? Right. And Mr. Giacomo, your history in law enforcement, you said it's as unsafe as you've ever seen it today in New York.
Yes, that's correct.
And isn't that the ultimate measure? Isn't that the question? And I think one of the things that I think merits focusing on is the question that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been talking about in terms of jurisdiction. What is the jurisdiction here? Mr. Giacomo, are you familiar with 922G and 924C in the federal code?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
922G being felons in possession, 924C being the ability to be able to go after somebody and give it a heightened sentencing for their use of firearms and crimes. And my question here, we might suspend.
The committee will suspend. The gentleman is recognized to continue.
All right, so we're back on. 922G and 924C, these are federal crimes, right? And they're federal crimes that we have programs like Project Safe Neighborhoods that work with local law enforcement, where we have the United States Attorney's Office in coordination to try to combat crime and the use of firearms in crimes. Now, I suppose we could go through and look at the laundry list of legislation that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have introduced to repeal said federal laws, that these federal laws should not exist. Now, we want to have a debate about federalism about that. Happy to have it. But we're not doing that, are we? Because that's not what this is about. It's about show. The fact is we do have federal laws on the books to go after criminal misuse of firearms, but they're not being enforced. And they're also not being enforced at the local level. Those are the facts. And the facts are we're letting criminals out of jail. If you look at the data is clear. The average criminal has 11 prior arrests, 5 criminal convictions. 77% have
We
5
need the
plus.
crowd to be quiet, please. Thank you.
5 plus prior arrests. 74% have prior violent arrests. 30% have prior arrests for guns and weapon offenses. Even though these individuals have lengthy criminal records, 52% served a year or less. 60% are rearrested within 2 years of release. The fact is we have a recidivism problem, and we have now gone down the road of decarceration. Hundreds of thousands of criminals have been released. Just since 2020, the incarcerated population is down about 300,000. When it was 2.1 million, which, by the way, was pretty far down from the levels when we had the safest numbers and the safest streets in the city. But this isn't about some libertarian worldview of letting out a few potheads who are allegedly rotting in jail. 88% of prisoners are incarcerated in the state systems for murder, rape, robbery, and assault. It's responsible for most of those sentences. A mere 14% are in custody primarily for narcotics offenses, and the vast majority of these are felony trafficking crimes and misdemeanor possession. My question is for you, Mr. Giacomo, is do you think that we have a problem with the gun issue, or do you think we have a problem with letting criminals out on the streets?
Well, the criminals are being let out at an alarming rate. And I just want to make it clear here that the guns, I'm speaking for New York City, the guns that are being used here in New York City are illegal guns. Yeah. They're illegal guns that are brought here into New York City and being used to victimize the people.
And are they being prosecuted heavily by the DA here?
No, they're not.
Right. And isn't that the problem?
That is a major problem.
And are they being prosecuted in coordination with the United States Attorney's Office using 922G and 924C to prosecute them?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. And isn't that fundamentally the problem?
Correct.
Question I have, my colleagues on the side of the aisle mentioned former President Trump a number of times. I would just ask, was it former President Trump, Ms. Brame, that killed your son?
No.
Ms. Harrison, was it former President Trump that killed your loved ones?
No.
Was it former President Trump that stabbed Mr. Alba? Was it former President Trump that prosecuted Mr. Alba and prosecuted him for defending himself? No. I yield back.